When my parents told me I was going to have a little sister, I was ecstatic. I was 6 years old, full of excitement at the idea of a tiny person looking up to me, following me around and calling me Big Sis. I imagined tea parties, playing, dress-up and bedtime stories, but reality was nothing like that. At first, I didn't understand the difference. My sister wasn't like other babies. She didn't giggle when I made funny faces. She didn't reach for my hand or coo when I talked to her. She cried. Loud, piercing cries that never seemed to stop. And my parents? They disappeared into her world. A world that didn't include me. The shift was slow but undeniable. One day, I was the center of their world. The next, I was moving into the basement because my sister needed to be closer to Mom and Dad. That night, in the cold, damp basement, I realized something. I was no longer their priority. I tried to adjust, to accept that this was just the way things were now. But as time went on, the feeling of being an afterthought only grew stronger. Losing my toys was the first real heartbreak. My sister didn't mean to break them, but she did, over and over again. My dolls, my puzzles, my favorite stuffed animal, gone, chewed up, ripped apart. I remember bringing one of my ruined toys to my mom, hoping for at least some sympathy. "She's younger. She doesn't understand," my mom said. "You're the big sister. You have to be more understanding." That was the moment I realized my feelings didn't matter. The final straw came, when my school gave me a MacBook as a reward for my hard work. It was mine, something I had earned. And then, just like my toys, it was destroyed. My sister got to it, smashing the screen and ripping off the keys. I expected my parents to be furious, not at me, but at the situation. Instead, they were just indifferent. "You should have put it somewhere safer," my dad said. I was blamed for something I had no control over. I had worked so hard for that laptop, but in the end, it was just another thing lost in the chaos of our home. Being a teenager means wanting to have a life outside of your house. But for me, that was impossible. Every time I made plans, I had to cancel. Every time I tried to study, I was interrupted. I was always on call for my sister. Then came the day of the Spider-Man movie. For weeks, my best friend Jake had been talking about it. It was supposed to be a fun night, just 2 hours of normal teenage life. I made a decision. Just this once, I was going to turn off my phone and enjoy the movie. When I turned it back on after the credits rolled, my stomach dropped. Missed calls. Dozens of texts. I called home, my hands shaking. "Where were you?" "We needed you an hour ago," my mom yelled before I could even speak. I rushed home, guilt gnawing at me, but also a deep, simmering anger. My parents were waiting, disappointment written all over their faces. "We rely on you," my dad said. "And you just disappear for a movie?" I tried to explain. I just wanted a break. But they didn't care. "Your responsibilities here are more important than some movie," my mom said. And just like that, I was grounded. That night, staring at my ceiling, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't allowed to have my own life. Then came the school speech. For the first time in a long time, I had something that was just for me. My teachers believed in me. My classmates were excited for me. And my parents, they promised they would be there. I stood on stage, scanning. The crowd, searching for their faces. But they never came. They missed it. Why? Because something had happened with my sister. Again. I held back tears as I spoke, my voice trembling. The audience clapped, but it felt hollow. What was the point of achieving anything if no one in my family cared? That night I cried harder than I ever had before. It wasn't just about the speech, it was about every moment I had been pushed, aside, ignored, forgotten. Then came the conversation about college. For once, I felt hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this would be my chance to start fresh. I was excited, looking at brochures, dreaming about the future. And then my dad laughed. "Make sure you pick a high-paying major so you'll be set to take care of your sister when we're gone," I snapped. Years of frustration, of neglect, of being treated as nothing more than my sister's second parent. It all came pouring out. "It's not fair. I didn't choose this," I screamed, but my parents just stared at me. No apologies, no understanding, just silence. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and cried until I couldn't breathe. They never even came to check on me. That night I made a decision. I packed a bag, grabbed my essentials, and walked out the door. I texted Grandpa, "I need to get away." His response was immediate. "Doors open. Living with Grandpa has been like stepping into another world. It's peaceful." For the first time in years, I feel like a person, not just a caretaker. Then the truth came out. My parents had been lying to the whole family. They had been taking money meant for a professional caregiver, but never hired one. My extended family was furious. My aunt, who had been giving them money for years, decided that, from now on, it would go straight to me, for my college fund. Then came the final conversation with my parents. They admitted everything, but they didn't apologize. My dad looked me in the eye and said, "You were born to take care of your sister. That was it." That was the moment I knew I was never going back. The future is mine. Sitting in my new room at Grandpa's, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had a plan. I had a future. And most importantly, I had a choice. I don't know what my relationship with my parents will look like in the years to come. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. But I do know this. I will never let anyone make me disappear again. This time, I choose me.